How's it going, everyone? I am Jeremy Alexander, and welcome back to another platformer video. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be adding in our environment. We're going to be designing our level a bit more, and this is going to give us all of the things that we need to interact with the level, things that we want to progress the player to move forward and or move backward. So what we want to do here is we want to actually start with our spikes. Spikes and things like coins, and what else we're going to add, platforms. Those are the things we're going to focus on, because these are very, very typical things that you would have in a platform game, and they're there for a reason, because they really work and they influence your gameplay a whole lot. So what we're going to do is let's grab our spike and let's actually put it onto its own layer. So if you're using the free version, this is starting to become more than the free version will allow. You only have a 4-layer limit, so I would hold off and try to leave the spikes object on maybe the tile map layer, something that you can move underneath the tile map, otherwise it'll look a little funny. So what I'm going to do here is call this spikes, and what I want to do is right click and move to layer spikes. Then I want to move this down underneath the tile map, so now when we put it on our tile map, it'll be underneath. Now, we have a few things we need to do here. The first thing is we actually need to set the angle of this sprite to be 90 degrees. And when we do that, it's going to be facing downwards. So right now it's facing upwards. Actually, it's at 0. So it's probably like right here. And what we want to do is we want to add some behaviors. We want this to be controlled by the construct 2 behaviors. So to do so, we're going to have to access that angle, and we want to make sure that it's falling downwards, so it's falling down at 90 degrees. So to do this, we're just going to click on the object sprite. We're going to go to the angle, and we're going to set the angle of this instance to 90 degrees. Now we're going to copy and paste this instance, so all of them will be at 90 degrees. But then you're going to notice that the sprite itself, or the image itself, is actually not facing downwards. So to fix this, let's double click, and let's actually crop this first. Then what we can do is we can rotate by 90 degrees clockwise or counterclockwise. So what we're going to do here is we're going to rotate clockwise once, and then we're just going to hit exit, and now you can actually see that it is facing the correct way. Now that we have it set up, we're going to add our behaviors. There are 3 behaviors to add to the spike. The first one is going to be the bullet behavior, because we need it to move downward at 90 degrees. The second is going to be the line of sight. Now this is going to get our player's position. There are other ways to do this, but I find that if you're just starting off, using the behaviors and getting used to them is the best way to just prototype things. Then finally, what we're going to add here is a sine wave. Now this sine wave is actually going to control our movement, and we're going to be using this for the coin as well. And there's so many cool things that you can do with the sine waves. We're actually going to be using it a lot. So we're going to add all 3 of these things. The sine wave will provide our anticipation. So when the player walks into the frame where there's a spike, you'll see the spike starting to shake at a random interval. So what we're going to do here is we are now going to put this onto our tile map. So let's go over here, and I'm just holding space to kind of pan around, and then I'm clicking and dragging. And let's put this right above here. I have my tile map locked, so I can't edit it, but you can see that now my actual sprite is going underneath, because that's where I put this layer. So if you are using the free version and you want to conserve layer space, then put this onto your tile maps layer and right click and put the Z order underneath. That's going to be your best bet in doing it that way, rather than putting it on its own layer. So what we're going to do now, let me lock these layers again, is we're going to go back into our event sheet. And let me zoom out here so we can see what's going on. We have a whole lot of events already going on just for our player, but we're going to actually just continue to add groups. And then we're actually, when we get to our platforms, we're going to talk about how to pause the game and not pause and unpause the game. So, or resume the game. What we're going to do is we're going to add a new event for our spike, and we're going to say system for each object spike. Now what this is going to do, it's a for each statement. So it's saying for each instance of this object. So here's instance 1, here's instance 2. This line will target both of them. So all I did was copied and pasted the first object here, and I'll do that again in a second. But this is going to target all of them rather than just one particular instance. So for each instance of the spike, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the spike object, and as we added behaviors, we now have those behaviors actions. So we're going to set the spike sign behavior. We're going to set the period of the sign behavior and the magnitude to be a random amount. So what we're going to do here is we're going to set, oops, that's the wrong one. We're going to set the period to be random, and we're going to do 0.1 to 0.6. And construct 2 comes with these functions. So we haven't gone over many functions yet, but if you type in functions, or if you look right here, you have something called the objects with expressions window. Now this is a window that actually has all of the events that are built in with construct 2 that are there for you to use. So if I go to the system events here, and if I type in random, you can see that this is what the random function does. It generates a random number, and it passes 2 numbers to generate within a range. So what we are doing here is we're typing in random, and when I actually do that, it pops up this quick help. But then if I actually hit the parentheses, you can see it tells me the parameters that are required to make sure that this doesn't become an error. Like I could do this, and this will actually, that worked. But we could actually do it so it would actually make an error if we had an extra comma, or if we left something like that. It actually won't let us finish the statement there. So what we want to do here is we want to randomize the period that the sine wave is going to move by 0.1 and 0.6 and hit OK. So now each object is going to get a random period to move between. This might be 0.1, whereas this might be 0.4, whereas this might be 0.6. So that way we can create a more random control. And I do this for a lot of objects, so I think that's something that you should be getting used to. The next thing what I'm going to do here is I'm going to control copy and control paste. I'm going to double click and hit back. It's just a faster way to get to our magnitude. And I'm going to do the same thing, except I'm going to set the magnitude between 0.1 and 0.78. Doesn't really matter, whatever you want to set this to. And if we just look at that right off the bat, we can hit play here. And if we just look at what that looks like it went away. Where did it go? Where did they go? Oh, because we have the bullet behavior on and we haven't messed with any of that, it just kind of flew off the screen. So what we're going to do here is let's just disable this for right this second, just so you can see the shake, and then we'll come back to it. All right, so I only did it for that one instance, so that's a pretty good example, but you can see it shaking up there, and I can actually move this down. I turned the bullet behavior off for this instance, but since I copied and pasted it, these instances have it enabled. So let me delete these, and we'll just focus on this one. And let me hit save and hit play again, just so you can see. And let me pause there. Now you can see it shaking. Now this is just a very small amount, and for a random amount of time for each individual instance. So that's our intended effect, and that's what we want to have happen when we look at them. Now, what we're going to be setting up next is the line of sight. So when it sees it, it's actually going to trigger the bullet behavior, and then it's going to actually just fall and destroy on collision. But it's also, if it hits us, it'll actually hurt us. So that's the whole point of these spikes. Now, having spikes, and this is something we're about to talk about, having spikes fall at a random amount of time or a set amount of time is up to you, but this is what influences your gameplay. This is how you can make a hard level into an easy level, or an easy level into a hard level. So what we're going to do to make this happen is we're going to go back to our event sheet, and we're going to actually make a sub event for our for each, because we need a new condition here and we don't want it to be an and statement. So what we're going to do for this is we're going to double click, and we're going to go to the spike again, but this time we're going to go to the line of sight. Now, if we have the line of sight to the position of the player, because I prefer doing the position over just the object, although they might be very similar. So if we have the position to object player.x for the x column or row, object player.y, then what is going to happen? Well, here's where we can again randomize when we want the bullet to be enabled. So let's actually go here and let's make sure that this is disabled. It is, because now when I copy and paste, every single instance will have that field disabled. But if I forgot to do that, I could add it here and just set for each instance, set the bullet to disable. I could put that right there as well. That way, if I had forgotten to do so like I did before, it'll correct itself. But since I didn't, we can take that out. And what we're going to do here is we're going to actually then, you know what? Let's just bring this back and drag it down and set it to enabled. That's all we needed to do. But what this is going to do is immediately, as soon as you see the player, it's just going to fall. And we don't want that because it already saw the player forever ago. So what we want to do here is we want to perform a wait. Now this is very common in Construct 2 and I use it all the time. It is a very helpful system function. So what we're going to do is go to system and type in wait, and this is going to wait a number of seconds before running the next action. So we're going to wait a random amount of time. We can wait between random 3 and 4, maybe. We can give that a shot. And then we're going to put this on top because it's going to play this statement, and it's going to wait 3 or 4 seconds before it actually sets the bullet to enabled. So let's see what happens here. So now it's waiting, and then it falls. So that might be a little too slow. So what we could do is we could just set it to a static interval. We could have it say, wait 3 seconds before you set the bullet to enabled every single time. And that way we have more control over these spikes. So there we go. I ran past it. It waited 3 seconds and it fell down, which is really cool. All right. So I realized that because we have our spike below this layer, that this tile might not work here, but we can change that later. But now we actually have our spikes implemented, and you can always mess around with the behavior. So just again, a quick recap here. What we have is the bullet behavior, which is controlling our speed. We can update the speed by putting it to 500, 600, doesn't really matter. It'll just move faster when it actually falls. Then we have our line of sight, which is checking to see if we have our player. Now, actually, one of the things I want to do with the line of sight, because it might get a little stuck at times, is we want to have it trigger on a custom basis. So we only want it to, let's see what this says here. Choose whether solids obstruct the line of sight or if to use custom objects added by events. So we could actually make it pick which actually obstructs the line of sight. But because we have it set to find the X and Y, it'll actually work just fine if we set it to custom. So let's see here how that's going to work. So you can see this, and then it falls. Let's see. That's a little slower than I intended it to be. So maybe what we can do here is we can wait 0.3 seconds. That's going to be a lot faster. And what we can even do is put that to 0.6 seconds maybe. The more spikes that we have, the more you mess around with this, the more opportunities you get to just mess around with what makes your game feel good. All right, so we can come back to that, but we have it all implemented. What we want to do now is we actually want to have the collision happen. And on top of the collision, we want to be able to collide with the player and the tile map. And in addition to that, we might want to have the screen shake. Now, this is something that is common in a lot of video games today, and it's actually a huge importance. If your video game doesn't have the screen shake, then it's going to feel a little bit less of a video game. And I don't mean that to knock your video game. Of course, you don't have to have screen shake, but it certainly helps just make the game feel like you're actually involved, like it's the camera that you're seeing through, you know? So what we're going to do here is we're going to create a new group for this. And actually, we'll group everything at the end here. What I want to do is I want to collide with the tile map. So I'm going to add the event for the spike to on collision with another object, collide with our tile map. So we need to find the tile map object in here in our level, tile map level, and hit OK. Okay, so if it collides with the tile map level, what's going to happen is we want our spike to destroy itself, just like that. So now if it hits anywhere, it should destroy. And we might have already missed it because I put it down to 0.6. So let me try putting this down to 1 second, see what happens. Let's hit play. Let's see if we can watch it collide. Oh, it's already gone. Okay, well, we'll add more of those, and you should be able to see that. So let me copy and paste, and hit OK. And we'll go back and we'll snap those together. And now they're all disappearing. Where are they going? Where are our spikes going? Let's see. So that's interesting. Oh, I know why. It's because we actually have them it's already colliding with the tile map here. So maybe I want to move this down just a little bit so it doesn't destroy immediately here. Let's see if I can fix that otherwise. Okay, so that did fix that issue there. But what I want to do is I want to add in, okay, I know exactly what I was doing. That was confusing. But what I want to do here is I actually want to add in an additional check. Because I want to have this behind the tile map, I need to be able to also check to see if it's falling. Otherwise, it'll just destroy itself like you just witnessed, and it confused me. So what we're going to do is we're going to add another condition here. So on collision with the tile map level, and we're going to hit C on the keyboard to make an and statement here, or an and condition. And the bullet behavior of our spike has traveled greater than 50 pixels, then destroy the spike. Then it's okay to actually destroy the spike. And this will actually give us some room to actually see these objects fall just like that. All right, that makes more sense, and I'm a lot happier with that. I'm not happy with the timing on this. We might be able to mess around with that, make it longer, make it shorter. So feel free to mess around with what feels good for your game. Okay, so now that we have this collision working, what we need to do is we need to call our screen shake. So let's actually do that. Let's group all of this together. Let's call this our spike. Whatever you want to do. You can call it spike. You can call it the spike function. Doesn't really matter. And what I want to do is I want to make a screen shake for our player. Now, usually I have it for the camera object, but since we actually added the scroll to our player, this is going to act as our screen shake. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a function. I believe we've already added the function plugin in our plugins folder. We're going to call this on function. We're going to call this our screen shake, and then we're going to put an underscore and call it func. And that's just a way that I like to define my functions. I'm always messing around with different naming conventions, things that I like, things that make organization easier. So feel free to name this function whatever works for you. So on the screen shake function, what we want to have happen is we want to call the player's scroll to behavior to shake, which it has. It has two options here. We can set it to enabled or disabled, or we can set the entire camera to shake, which is exactly what we want to have happen, except we don't want to set one magnitude and one duration. We want to be able to change the magnitude and duration. So to do this, we're going to type in function.param0, and we're going to type in function.param1, and we're going to leave it at reducing magnitude and hit OK. Now we're done with our screen shake function. It was pretty much that simple. So what I want to do here is I want to make a group for it. I want to call it screen shake, and I want to put this in there. And now I have the opportunity to call this function and actually give it parameters that will indicate what the magnitude is and what the duration should be. So here's when I want to trigger the screen shake. I want to find out if it collided, and I want to find out if it's on the screen. So I'm going to hit B. I'm going to double click and go to the spike, and I'm going to type screen. And you're going to get this behavior right here that says if the spike is on the screen. So if right here, it's not on the screen, but right here, it is. So if our player's right here and you can see these spikes and then it collides, it'll call the screen shake. But even if it's like right here, if it's not on the screen at all, it will not call the screen shake. And I need to have that in there because otherwise the game will get too hectic with the screen shake. So you need to know how to manage it and what makes your game feel good, but also makes sense. Because if you had a bullet that you were to fire from here, and it went all the way over here, and then it collided, and then your screen shaked way after the fact you were already fighting a different enemy, you would almost think that it's a bug. It wouldn't actually feel like that just happened. So what we're going to do here is if it's on the screen, then we're going to call that screen shake function. And to do that, we're going to go to our plugins, we're going to go to our function, and we're going to hit call function. In the call function, what we're going to do is call the screen shake function, because that's what I called it. And then we're going to add the two parameters. So function.param0, and this is going to be our magnitude, and we're going to add function.param1. So we're going to mess around with this, but I'm going to give you a rule of thumb. You want to keep the duration of the screen shake between 0.1 and 0.6 seconds, because otherwise it'll be too long of a screen shake. I mean, you might have some situations that could be longer, and we might do that for the boss, but for the most part, when it comes to little things to make your game just feel that much better, you want to keep it between 0.1 and 0.6. So I usually go for 0.2 or 0.3. And then the magnitude, how violent the shake would be, I'm going to put that to 3, and you want to keep that between 2 and 6 probably. That's usually what I mess around with. Sometimes I'll go higher, sometimes I'll go to 8, and I'll do it for a second, and that's pretty much for the only things you would use a bigger screen shake like that for is a bigger boss battle, or if a ginormous enemy was jumping around, then you would use that. Okay, so if our spike is on the screen, then call the screen shake function. So let's hit save and let's test this out. And let's see what happens. Bam, you can see it for 2.2 seconds and it's screen shake. That's perfect for what we needed. So we are good to go there. But let's actually develop this further and let's continue with our collisions. So what I wanted to find out next is what our spike collides with our player. Now, if you want to have the screen shake work for everything, you can do that as well. So let me hit B here on the group and hit paste. And I'm going to change this object. I'm going to say if we're colliding with our player, what is going to happen? If we collide with our player, well, I'm going to control click this because I want it to call our screen shake, and I can actually change the screen shake a little bit because it's our player. It's not the tile map, it's our player. So I could put this to 5, I could put this to 0.3, just so it has more of an impact on the actual game. Then there's going to be other things that I'm going to want to call here, and we don't have them at the moment, but things like, let's think what we want to call. We want to call the lose health function for the player, and we're also going to want to call the player hurt sound because that's what's going to happen. A spike just fell on the player's head. To make a comment, just select something and hit Q on the keyboard, and then you can type it out, and then this doesn't get rendered into the code because it's just for your own notes. And then another thing I like to do is hit Control G, and that should be able to bring up the bookmarking tool, and you can actually go to the View tab, go to your bookmarks bar, and then you can find exactly what you have bookmarked, and I can double click on that, and it'll take me right to the bookmark, which is actually really helpful for to-do lists and things like that. Since we're actually recording this, I just want to have these here so I know to go back and add these in. So what we're going to do is we're going to eventually add in these other two functions, but since we only have the screen shake function right now, we're going to have that play. And also what we're going to do is we're going to have our player flash. So if we look at our player and we look at our behaviors, we had already added a flash behavior to it, and now is the time we're going to use it. So let's go to our player, let's go to our flash behavior and click on flash. Now we want this to flash quickly. So what we're going to do is we're going to make the on time for the flash to be 0.05, and we're going to do the off time to be 0.05. And then we're going to actually leave the duration at 1 second. So now every 0.05 seconds for 1 second long, it's going to flash the player, and that should look pretty good. So let's hit play there, and let's watch what happens when it hits and I'm flashing. So I'm flashing for a little bit extra. Maybe you don't want to do 1 second long, but it's flashing enough to tell the player, tell the user that we've been injured, and now we're a little bit, immune to any damage that is about to happen. While you're flashing, you are immune. There's another word for that I'm blanking out on right this minute. All right, so let's add in our final collision here. And what we want to do is we want to collide with these platform objects. You know what? Let's actually add those platform objects in from our assets folder. I had added them back because I had forgot to put them in on the first try here. So let's grab our horizontal platform and let's add that in. Let's call this object horizontal platform. Let's double click, add a new sprites, and let's add in the vertical platform. And let's exit out of that. And let's call this our object vertical platform. Okay, cool. So we're going to do these objects in a bit here, but what we want to do is we just want to have them here, and we want to set it to bounding box. Set our collision to bounding box. We just want to have these objects here for right this second so I can set up all of the collisions for the spike so we don't have to do that later. So let's do that right now, where I'm going to copy and paste this. Now, since we have two of the same object, I'm going to hit Y. I'm going to double click on this condition here, and I'm going to change it to collide with the horizontal platform. Then I'm going to hit Control, copy, and paste. So now we have an OR statement to say if we collide with the horizontal platform or if we collide with the vertical platform, what is going to happen. In this case, we're going to want to leave ourselves a note to play the spike death sound. So we're going to give lots of sounds to these. The more sounds you have, as long as it ties in with your theme of the game, the way that the music would play out, the better. It's usually going to add to your game feel. And that's something that I'm trying to get across here, that all of these things that we're doing, the sine waves that move, the screen shake, and the flashes, that actually influences how the user appeals to the game. So what we want to do here is we want to call our spike death sound, and then the only thing we want to do is destroy our spike. So I'm going to copy this and hit paste. Cool. So now everything should be set up for the spike minus those functions that are missing that we will add in later. But now we have our working spike. So let's go over here and let's start to add them in appropriately. So now that we have our spikes layer, let's actually snap it to the grid. Let's see what happens. We're snapping from the middle, so it doesn't really matter where we put this, but for what we could do is we could try putting this to the left or to the top left. Let's try the top left first and see how that works. Nope. Let's put it to the left. or we could leave it at the middle. It doesn't really matter. Usually for tiles, I like to put it to the top left, but since this one has been rotated around a little bit, let's leave it at the middle. Forget I did that. Because I'm doing this, it'll actually affect the other instances as well, so we don't have to go in here and add that one as well. You can see that the rotation point is right there, so you can rotate from that origin point. That's where it is. So I think this should be good. I think we already know that they're falling right about there. We want them to fall into this little crack here. And let me look at my original level design and what I had before. So what I have in the demo, and what I want to do is I want to put that back to where I had it because I liked the exact positioning that I had it on. So if we go all the way over here and we hit paste, we can see here that we have some room for some spikes. So let me put 3 there, copy and paste again, and put those guys there. And I'm trying to think what else we could do. Maybe another group of 3. Let's put another group of 3 there. Then let's actually take this group of 3 and let's put it right around here. And I think we are good until we hit the wall. So what we want to do is we want to go to the wall, copy and paste spikes. And when you see it come up right there, that's the layer I'm about to paste on. And let's put the spikes there. Let's put the spikes there and there. Let's see, the distance between that and that is pretty good. Let's put one more set of spikes there. Okay, so before I continue, let me just show you what I did. All I did was copied and pasted the first 3 spikes that we had, and I put them here. Now, by having them in a row like this, and having them all delayed at the same time, so they are each waiting a second to fall, when our player comes across them, they're all going to fall when they hit 1 second, and it's going to create this little trail effect. And you're actually going to have enough time to get away, but the idea is to have just enough time to get away. We want to make sure that our players can get away from these spikes. We don't want to just immediately kill them. That would be creating a rage game. So by having them all wait at the same time, we can actually mess around with how they can safely just get away. We want to make sure that if you replay the game, maybe you hit the jump too wrong, or maybe your jump height went too high, higher than you expected, and you were trying to go forward and you kind of triggered these all at once and you were like, oh no. That's the idea. We want to really just kind of throw you off. And then having these 3 here is going to really throw you off, followed by a huge row of these. And I actually think this one is too far there. So basically what I did is I had them all snapped to the grid, but if I don't want them to be perfectly on the grid, I can just move them over with the arrow keys by selecting them. And I might not want to have it there because this one would have collided like right here, and I don't want to have it there. I want to have it collide here and have it be done with. So let's continue. And let's put some more spikes wherever we like, really. It doesn't really matter where you put the spikes. I'm designing it based on what I had originally had because that's what I wanted to explain. So let's put some spikes over here. And we're actually about to talk about coins after we do our platforms here. So our coins are something that I'm going to talk about and save, but we're going to have a whole lot of coins here. Then we're going to have another spike field right here. So let me grab all of these guys, copy those and paste them down here and just kind of put it right there. And I'll get rid of these 2. So that way these are kind of falling right here in this little nook underneath this. And let's keep going. We can have 3 right here, which is what I did before, but these won't line up, so I have to move them over. And this is just a very simple way to design your levels with Construct 2. Are there other ways to do this? Of course, but this is a really manual way of doing it, and I actually like doing it this way. And I hope that this gives you a better sense of how you can design fun games with Construct 2. Let me put some spikes over here into the secret nook, put some over here. We'll put some arrows there, baby, too. I think we are good. Let's put, oh, I know, right before we enter the boss, let's put a big row of spikes. Just to really mess with you. Let's get rid of that one. And I think we should be good because our door is going to go here. We have all of our spike objects that I could possibly want. Unless we want some up here, I think we are good to go on our spike objects. So let's hit save and let's hit play and let's see how that plays. So let's run. Okay, those spikes fell, which is great. Looks like those spikes fell already. So we might have to fix our code a little bit here. It might have already detected our, let's see, it might have already detected, wow, it detected all of these. Okay, so we're going to have to kind of mess around with, I didn't get the power up either. We're going to have to mess around with why that happened. So in our for each, we're setting the magnitude, and then we're waiting for the spike to go. And unless all of these didn't get the disabled, which they should have, then what else could be messing with that? Let's think. Oh, you know what? No, they're all right there. Let's think. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to see if I can fix this real fast and just figure out what I did wrong, but that's okay, and I'll be right back. All right, welcome back. So apologies on that part. I was so confused as to why it was falling beforehand, and then I realized that I had forgot to set the cone of view to 90 degrees, which is exactly what we have for our angle, and the image is facing 90 degrees as well, and the cone of view needs to be facing downwards. It was set at 360, which means that all of these are set at 360 except for this one here. So to fix that, all I had to do was add in set line of sight cone of view to the spike to our for each, and now they all have the same cone of view of 90 degrees. So if you didn't make that mistake, or if you're watching this in real time here, you don't have to well, I guess you may have already copied and pasted all of these too. But there's two ways that you could do that. You could just add it in like that, like I did for each instance of this, or you could, before you copy and paste, change it there. It really does not matter that much, but that was what was confusing. Okay, so now if I hit play, now that that's working, if we go and look at this, we can see it falling in the way that we would want it to. And I'm right here, and they're shaking, but they're not falling. Grab my little power-up guy here. And we can come down here, and some of them will start to trigger, and that's the intended effect. You want it to kind of do that, where you have to run away and you can't run back, because that's going to make your game just be that much better. I don't want to keep saying that's going to make your game feel better, but it really is going to bring those gameplay elements that you might be missing when you're first starting off to make your first platformer game. So remember, we have our nice wall jump and stuff. We can always increase those values and mess around with those. And everything's working pretty well. So let's actually add in our arrow collision, and then we'll get to our moving platforms before this lecture is over. So let me actually move our orb here, our power up, and let's put this over here to where how I would like it to be for right now. And what we're going to do is we're going to put on the spikes layer our arrow collision. So we already have our arrow stuff right here. It's on our entities layer that I just locked. So let me move both of these to the layer so I can select them both and move them to the spikes layer. Then I can lock the entities layer, and I can grab both of them, and I can bring them over here. Now what I want to do here is I want to just place them all over our map, and I actually might need to have these guys at the top left or somewhere close to the top left to actually pinpoint the origin. So let's go quick assign origin point to the top left. And now we're pivoting from the top left, and yeah, I like that better. So let's do the same thing for, actually, you know what? We can leave the top ones for like that. That should work just fine. But for this, I can move this down from the top left, and then I can move it over, which is what I want to do. Technically, what we could do is we can make this a tiled background. Oh, you know what? Maybe we should do that instead. Okay, let's do that instead, because then you're going to like this more. So let's delete those two sprites after all that. Let's double click and add a new tiled background. And let's open up the image for the arrow floor. And let's open up the image for, let's make another tiled background for the arrow ceiling here. And yes, we could have just cloned it and done it the other way as well. Doesn't really matter. Let's call this object arrow ceiling. Just kidding. We already have those objects. Let's delete those guys then. Where did I put them? Let's delete both of these and give them their new names. This is going to be our object arrow ceiling, and this is going to be our object arrow floor. Now, by doing it as a tile background, I don't have to keep copying and pasting like I did with the spikes. I can just have 5 objects that'll actually tile horizontally. So object arrow, let's go ceiling. Which one is this? This is the ceiling. This is the floor. Object arrow floor then. Okay. So what we want to do here, since these sprites are 32 by 32, we want to just put this all the way down to as close to as 32 by 32 as we can. And then we can actually make it, if it's not perfect, we can just turn off snap to grid, and we can move it to 32. And if it needs to be a little bit less, I guess the sprite might be a little bit less than 32. It is. So let's put it to 28 is the height. So let's go here to our size and put this to 28 pixels. And let's do the same over here. Instead of it being 32, let's go 28. When you're snapping to the grid, you're snapping to whatever your grid height and grid width is. And in our case, it is 32 by 32 because most of these tiles are, but just in case some of them are 28 or 18 by 18, then we can change that. So if I put snap to grid back on, let's see how we snap there. And I'm actually fine with how that snaps. Let's look at this. And now I can actually just tile this. So I could have it be 1 or I could have it be this long. And this doesn't look as good, so I want to turn snap to grid off and I can move this underneath somewhere like that. And I'm fine with that. And I can even move this up a little bit if I really needed to. Oh, let's make sure that these are on the appropriate layers by going to move to the layer spikes, just so this goes underneath our tile map. Otherwise, it'll look a little funny. Okay, and let me copy and paste the arrow floor here, and let me put this kind of like this. That way we're just kind of blocking off this platform. So I kind of was unsure if I wanted to leave that in there as a platform or if I wanted to have that as something else, but now I think I'll just leave it in there and I'll have these spikes block it off. So let's just kind of put this how we want it to. That looks fine for me right now. I'm happy with that. We can continue putting spikes elsewhere along the level. So let's put some spikes here, because now what you have is not only do you have spikes falling down, you also have these arrows. Let me call them by their correct name. You have these arrows right here that you have to avoid, and you can actually mess around. You can put, arrows on the walls if you really wanted to. You can mess around with how you might want it to look. I might even go a little bit further and put some new arrows over here that I didn't have originally. And the best part about this is they don't have any behaviors because all we're going to be doing is colliding. So we can actually avoid putting behaviors in here. I'm going to copy and paste this and put this guy like right there. Maybe I'll leave a little bit more room for the player to jump up like I did in our demo. Like right there. That should be pretty good. So you have enough room to grab our orb. I can unlock our orb and I can move it over just a little bit. And let's go back to our spikes and just add until you feel there's no other place that you want to have these spikes. I want to have them here. And let's think where else I might want to have them. I want to have them here, like right there. And anywhere else that might be a good spot to put some spikes. If you put spikes here, it would just kind of be too much of a trap, in my opinion. You, of course, could do that. Your player would come, and then these, as soon as he hits right here, these 3 spikes will fall, and then these will start to fall, and then they realize they have to jump, and they might not be able to jump high enough, and they're no doubt they're going to take damage. So what I'd rather put here is an enemy than a spike, but I could put spikes here and make them try to wall jump a little bit. That could be interesting to mess around with. Maybe I want to make this a little bit less and put this over here, just kind of have 1 or 2. And we can mess around with that and just mess around. Because it's hidden behind the tile map, you can kind of get away with how you want to position this on the level. Okay, so I think we're pretty much good with our arrows and our spikes. So let's go to our event sheet here and let's actually add in our collision for this. Now, this is the part where I'm going to use a family, but of course you can just use an or statement. It doesn't really matter that much. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right click, add family. I'm going to add the object arrow ceiling and the object arrow floor to that family and hit OK. And I'm going to call this arrow collision, or I could just call this arrows. Now this family groups together these 2 objects. So when I give this family, if I collide with this family or anything that's in that family, I only have to write that code once, which is really powerful because I could put other things in there that have the same collision property. So what I want to do is I just want to go to our player, and if our player collides with, in this case, our arrows, because our families will always just pop up right here in the main object window. If we collide with the arrows, and now this is important because when you collide with things like this or things that are still, we want to find a way to actually, especially something like this when it's a bed of arrows versus just one arrow, we want to make sure that there aren't as many bugs. We want to make sure that if the player falls down and is constantly colliding with these, that they are actually always going to take damage. So you know what, actually what we want to do instead of colliding with, we want to check to see if we are overlapping it. And if we're overlapping it at any point, then we will be able to always, if we fell down here and we're still overlapping the arrow, we'll always be able to recheck and trigger for some health loss. So what we're going to do is we're going to add in one more condition. We're going to hit C, and we're going to say if the player is not flashing. So we have to select is flashing, then hit I on the keyboard. So if we're overlapping the arrows and we're not flashing, then we can actually trigger the hurt sound. We can trigger the actual lose health function. So what we're going to do that is we're going to actually set the vector X and the vector Y. So let's do that. Let's add the action of our player. Let's set the vector X, and this is going to move it horizontally. So we want to move it randomly. So to do it randomly, you would type in the random, or maybe you want to make the random an int. So you could do like an int random kind of thing. But what I really want to do is I want a little bit more control over it. So I'm going to use the choose function, which is also a randomized function because it's going to pick one of the values I give it. So it's a little less random than the other two functions that we could use, but we're going to just pick some numbers here. So what I want to do is I want to pick negative 500. I want to go 500. I want to go negative 500 again, or negative 500. Hold on. Just like that. And now I can start to copy and paste because now I have the same amount and I can just keep going and going, add a comma. And now I want to actually add it up. So maybe I want it to be 500, 500, negative 500, and that's cool. If you don't know what I'm doing yet, you'll see in a second. Let me copy and paste and do the same thing for the vector X. So to do this, I can just hit back and I can click on vector Y, and hit OK, because it's going to actually copy over my condition. So what we're going to do for this, and what this actually means, is it's going to take our platform object and it's going to move it either to the left or to the right, either negative or positive, and it's going to move up or down. And if it moves down, it's not going to move much. If it moves up, then it's just going to bounces up a little bit, and if it moves left or right, it's going to then re-trigger our flash because we want to make sure that we're not flashing. To re-trigger our flash, we're going to add a sub-event called trigger once, and this is in the system. We're going to type in trigger or TR to search, and then I'm going to pick trigger once while true. And if this is true, this is going to only trigger once, and this is actually the best way I know to trigger actions that you want to have control over, because a lot of actions sometimes you think you don't need a trigger once, especially with sound, and in reality you do. And it's also just good to get in the habit of doing trigger once, because that way you're preparing yourself to see what happens if you don't trigger it once. For example, if I just had it flash while it's overlapping, it'll continuously flash. And at this point, we just want it to trigger that once and then have it stop until this is true again. So you'll see this pop up a lot more when we do our sounds. What we're going to do here is we're just going to have the player flash. And another thing that we might want to do here is we might want to actually copy over our screen shake function. And for our flash, we're going to do the same thing, 0.05 for 1 second long. Maybe we want to make it a little bit longer because we did just hit an arrow, so we might want to give them more immunity, or invulnerability was the word I was looking for before. We want to give them a little bit more invulnerability before they can actually be attacked again. So one note we want to make here is we want to add the player lose health function again, and what we can do is we can add in our screen shake. So let's grab our spike screen shake, copy, and paste. And we don't want to have the same screen shake duration for every single one. I mean, we can leave the duration, magnitude. Maybe we want to mess around with 4, maybe it's a little bigger impact than it was before. But now, if we're overlapping the arrows, we're not flashing, we're actually going to be moving our player a little bit, and we're going to trigger the screen shake and have it flash. So let's hit play, and let's see how that looks. So if we go over here, bam, oh man, oh man, and oh man. So you can see how it's like waiting until I stop flashing and then it's triggering again, and that'll actually play a lot better than having it constantly flash. Now I actually don't like the way I put those arrows on there, so I'm just going to move these guys like this a little bit more. That way it's more to the points, and that way it looks a little bit better, like a platform, like arrows were growing on the platform. So right here, I'm still overlapping, so it's going to move me around. And here's a better example. You can see moving to the left, randomly moving to the right. Maybe it's going to move me there again, to the left again, And there you go. So it's just choosing randomly. And again, you can see our cool little spikes shake at the same time. And by this point, I would have lost health. But there we go. We have everything working for our spikes. All right. So we're moving along here. Everything is pretty much going as planned. Let's add in our moving platforms. Now, this is going to be on its own layer. So at this point, I am definitely breaking the 4-layer limit. So let's call this our platforms layer. And it's really important that you have this organization in your game and in your code. And it's important that you have it from the beginning, because it's just going to be easier down the line, especially if you want to take a game like this, because this is really built to be a fully featured game. You could really make this into something bigger. So you always want to just keep in mind that you want to have the utmost organization. Now, that's not to say that you couldn't use Construct 2 specifically for prototyping your projects, because you can, and it's fast. You can prototype your project in a heartbeat. So really, it's when it comes to pushing the boundaries with the free version, I would say get as much out of it as you can, but really consider upgrading due to the fact that you get so much more organization out of your code. If you're really going to use this for your job, your career, then it's really worth the investment. So now that I have my 5th layer, I'm going to add our platforms to it. So I'm going to unlock the entities layer here. I'm going to select our platforms. If I had put them on our platforms layer, it looks like I didn't. And I didn't put them there either. I put them on the spikes layer. Right click, move to layer, platforms. And now I can lock every other layer besides that. All right, so what we want to do for our platforms are as follows. We want to find a way to identify what kind of platform is what. And we want a way to actually figure out how we're going to move our platforms. So what we need to do here is we need to actually create an instance variable. So for our horizontal platform, I'm going to add instance variable called moving. And it's going to be a number. And 0 is going to mean that it's absolutely still. 1 is going to mean that it's moving at all. And that's all we really need. If we want to do it for our horizontal, I don't think we need to do it for the horizontal. But this way you kind of have some control. And if you wanted to add it to your horizontal one, you could. So let me put this over here. Let me get this right to where I want it to be, which is right there. And what we actually have the benefit of is we have the benefit of using the bounding box collisions, and we have the benefit of using the bullet behavior to actually control our moving platform. So let's do that. Let's add the behavior of bullet to it. And let's actually set the speed, because we want it to be active, but let's set the speed of this to, actually, you know what? We'll set it in code, so we don't have to do anything there. I was trying to think what else we would need to do. The one thing that I know we're going to need to have for this, and this is probably for the vertical platform. So let's think. Any other place that might need it? Nope, that's okay. I'm just talking to myself. What we want to do is we want to actually have, by having this as a bullet, we want this to bounce off of solids. So we could actually just turn this on. That should work pretty fine. I don't see if that'll actually mess up or not. But what this is going to do now is it's going to ping pong back and forth and bounce off these two solid objects, because this is a solid collision. The tile map has the solid behavior. So what we need to do for our vertical, because our vertical platforms, when they go up and down, it's going to be a little bit different. So we're going to have to manually create a trigger to actually tell it when to bounce and when to stop. So what we're going to do is we're just going to focus on this right now. So let's go to our event sheet here, and let's actually group our arrows together. We can call this arrows. Let's put that in there, and let's minimize our spike as well. And what we're going to do is we're going to make an instance variable check. So we're going to go to our horizontal platform, and we're going to compare the instance variable of moving. And if it equals 0, which it does, then what we're going to do is set the speed of our bullet behavior to our platform to be 0. So if moving equals 0, then the speed equals 0, which means it's not moving at all. What we can then do is we can select this, copy and paste, and we can change moving to equal 1. And if it equals 1, then we can actually make the bullet speed move. So we originally had it at 400 as the default bullet setting, but that's going to be way too much. So let's go for like 200. I think that should work pretty well. Now what we've set up is whatever instance has the moving instance variable of 1, it'll actually get the speed of 200. But if it has an instance variable of 0, it won't move at all. So in this case, we want to give this the instance variable of 1. But if I copy and paste this, and I put this over here because this gap right here is going to need a ledge, but I don't want this to move back and forth. I can now put this to 0 and hit OK. And this is actually going to have a speed of 0, which means that it'll actually not move at all, which is exactly what we needed. So now that we have our horizontal platform, let's hit play and see if it works. And let's see if it's moving back and forth by bouncing off the solids. And I actually took damage. So it is, but it's actually setting the angle. So let me actually fix that. Let me actually click on this. And to that point, let's actually delete this one first here. And let's get this one right, unlike with the spike situation there. Let's actually make sure that we are not setting the angle for our horizontal platforms. And let's hit OK. And let's see what happens there. Now you can create other types of movements too. And I keep falling for those spikes. By doing it with an instance variable, but there we go. And now the only thing is we're not actually able to land onto this platform. So let's actually make this into a platform. And to do this, since this is a platform, we don't want to actually give it a solid behavior, but what we want to give it is a jump through behavior. So let's add the behavior of jump through, which is right at the top here. And now we can actually jump and land on the solid, and we can even go through from the bottom on up, which is really cool. So I keep forgetting that those spikes are there, but now I can actually jump onto this object here just like that, which is really cool. And if I did end up being damaged over here, I can trace it and I can jump through. Let's fix the collision on our little guy here on our platform. Let's move this collision down. Let's try moving this down on the Y to 5, and let's move this down on the Y to 5, and let's hit OK, and let's hit save. And now we should have our moving platform. This is just a little close to the screen there, but we are going to move all that in a second. Now when I jump on this, it looks like I'm actually jumping on it, and now it's actually ping-ponging between the two solids. But what if we had the vertical moving platform, and what if the solids were not in the right vicinity for us to ping-pong off of? So that's what we need to set up next. So let's actually grab our moving platform that's supposed to be vertical, and let's put it over here. Let's try putting it right there. And what we can actually do here is we can actually rotate it a little bit. Let's think how I want to rotate this. We can actually rotate this angle to be 90 degrees as well. So let's actually set the angle here. Since we already have the sprite facing upwards like so, the way it comes, we can just rotate it 90 degrees, and even though the sprite is rotated at an angle, it's going to derive off of the way the image is facing. So now we actually have a way for this to move up and down because the pivot point's right here, and it'll actually move up and down instead of left to right. So let's add our bullet behavior to this, and let's actually add our jump through behavior as well. And now technically we could actually just do the same thing, and we probably could have just copied and cloned. We could also give it an instance variable of that, but I'm actually just going to set the speed here to have one neutral speed. Let's go for like 150, and let's see how that works. Now I want to play this, and I want to show you ping-ponging, watching it ping-pong off of the other solids. Actually, I don't think I had done that setting. I keep forgetting to do that setting. So bounce off of solids, yes. Set angle, no. And let's hit save. And now when it bounces off of the solid, it's actually going to bounce off of the wall, the ceiling. So let's watch here, and it actually might go a little crazy. It might not be in the path that we want it to be in. So let's see here what happens. So it's going to bounce all the way here, and then it's going to stop. And of course I get stuck, so that creates a bug. And then I hit the arrows, which is even worse for me. So obviously we can't have it ping pong between these solids. We need an invisible solid to take care of that. So what we're going to do is we're going to double click and add a new sprite here. We're going to call this, we're actually going to resize this, so that button right up there, and we're going to resize this to be 32 by 32, just so it's not a huge pixel, huge sprite. And we're going to call this object platform collision. And we're going to snap this to the grid, and we can actually just stretch this out right around here would be good, I think, as long as it's the width of this. Then I'm going to copy and paste this, and I'm going to put this down here. So by doing so, I'm now giving it two invisible boxes to kind of collide into, which is what you want to do. And this is actually a very basic technique that we are probably even going to use for enemies, just so we can actually put in a very simple way for enemies to bounce left and right. But now we actually have a way for our platform to move up and down without getting stuck and creating a bug. But now we actually have to program for that. We need to double check to see that our vertical collision can handle that. And this is where we're actually going to start to implement more things to the overall game. What I mean by that is we're going to be adding in a way to pause the game. Now, we're not going to do the pause menu until much later, but what we're going to do is we're going to group together all of these things. Let me actually call these our platforms. Let me call these our horizontal platforms. And let me put this in that group. And what we're going to do here is we're going to hit G, and we're going to call this our paused group. And I actually put that into this subgroup here. I meant to just put that out. I'm going to take everything we've made so far. I'm going to put that into the paused group, because this is going to be the easiest way to pause your game in Construct 2. The easiest way is going to be to literally activate and deactivate everything that's in the group. So we're going to have this in a pause group. Now, one of the bugs that I encountered when making the demo version was when you have a pause group like this, there's still certain things that need to be turned off or won't be turned off when you turn off the actions that we've just made. So this will make sense in a second. We need to have a non-pause group. So what we're going to do is we're going to see, and the first thing to our non-pause group is going to be for our vertical collision. So if our vertical platform collides with the collision object, so we're going to go object platform collision, then what's going to happen is we're going to set the vertical platform to bounce off the object platform collision. So this is going to have to happen outside of our pause group, and we're going to call this our non-pause group, or non-paused. And we're actually going to do this for our horizontal platform as well. So let's copy and paste this, and let's say, yeah, we need to replace this object. So what we can do here is we can hit R, and we can check to see if pick the object to be replaced. We want to pick the object as in the... When you hit R, you're replacing any of these objects. So since we have two objects here that could be replaced, and it's only going to find objects with the same behaviors attached to them. I'm going to hit R. Then the object I need to be replaced is the vertical platform to be with the horizontal platform. And then I'm going to hit, actually, you know what? No, it needs to collide with the platform collision. So if the horizontal platform collides with the platform collision, then we need to actually set the horizontal, so let's replace this with the horizontal to bounce off of the platform collision. So now what this is saying is even if we are paused, it'll still actually work and it'll actually still collide and it won't mess up. And that's just a bug that we're avoiding down the line. But now let's hit play and let's see if that works. And let's double check and see. I know the spikes are there now. They're not going to fool me twice. And let's go over here and let's see if this is actually ping-ponging to where we need it to be. Now, since we only have this colliding for where we set it to collide, we're actually not going, we can actually jump through the platform collision. I noticed here that our collision's a little off with the platform vertical. So let me fix the platform vertical bounding box. Let me go here, double click here, and let's just move this down. So let's see where this point would need us to be. This would also need to be at 5, and this would also need to be at 5. All right, so let's hit save. And let's hit play. So now we have our... Oh, I didn't fall for it that time. It got me. Now we have a lot of new elements that have already started to make our level feel like an actual level, like a classic game out of Mario or something like that. Even if it is basic and even if this is your own version without this artwork, which you are free to use, it's up to you. So basically, it's up to you how you want to make this game from here on in. You can have this vertical platform, and you can take the same instance variables that we did for the horizontal platform, and you can make them do their own thing. You can make them go at different speeds. You can make them bounce off of every object. You can start to really mess around and create your own gameplay feel that means something to you or that makes your game unique. Okay, so now that we have our platform done, let's actually start to put them around our level. So for our horizontal platform, I'm going to put some down here. And now since our horizontal platform is pretty much going to bounce off of solids or walls, what are we going to do when we actually need it to bounce off of one of these? Well, exactly what you think we would do. We would just put it here where we would want to. I'm going to try to keep it in between the grid here, and I'm going to try to make the horizontals bounce between walls as much as I possibly can, but there's only so much you can do without not having a wall. So what we're going to do here is we're going to put 2 here. We're going to have this one bounce off of this wall, And then we're going to have this one stop right here. And to make that stop, we already programmed it in the non-pause. I'm just going to copy and paste one of these guys here and make sure that it actually has a chance to collide. So I'm going to put it in the same row here with our platform. And I might even want to make that a little bit bigger. Same thing over here. This would bounce off of here, and then it would actually bounce off of here. But I'm going to actually save it from going that far, and I'm going to put this up here. So you kind of create a few more objects than you thought you would have needed, and there are other ways that you could do it without having to add these, but I prefer this because I get more control, and if something messes up, I know where it went wrong. So now that we have that, let's actually grab a vertical platform. Let's copy this guy, and let's put him over here. So we're going to have this go down probably like up to there. So we'll put this like right in there. Let's move it over so it fits in between these two sprites here. And then what I want to do is I want to have my horizontal platform that's not moving right here, as I had stated before. So let's put that there, and let's change the moving instance variable to 0. So now it has a speed of 0. And let's get our collision for our platform over here. Let's put this guy, let's make this one a little bit shorter because I don't want it to go up too high, and I don't want it to go down that low. Maybe like right. I'm afraid that if I put it down here, it might start to bounce off of other things that we don't want. So I'm going to put this over here. Generally, you can mess around with these origins. I know I have the origin in the middle, and I'm just kind of moving it around with the arrow keys, and that's something that's just easier to do right this minute. But you can have this pin to the top left, so it'll actually pin to the top. When we snap it, it'll snap to the top left and fit perfectly within the tile because they do have a 32 pixel height. Now that we have that platform, let's see if there's any other platforms I want to add. There is. So I'm going to copy all of these because I can select that and only grab what's on that layer. And I can put this like right here, which is good. And I think that that should collide well. If I need to make it bigger, I will. And maybe I want this to go down a little bit further, or maybe I want this to hug the wall a little bit more. I think is something that I like to do there. But actually, I think if we have this go down like this, we can mess around with how the player would get off since there are spikes here. So if it comes down here, then it's got like two little entrances that he could get off of. We can also program in later. I'll show you a way to program so we can actually go through the platform when you hold the down key. But that's another option there. So I think we're good on all the moving platforms and their collisions for right this second. I am going to take the horizontal platform that's not moving, the one that has moving to 0, and I am going to set them up for the boss. I'm going to put to here like this, and let's call it at that. Let's hit paste up here, and we'll design the boss later, but at least we have them in there for now. So let me hit save, and let me hit play, and let me move around and see how this works. Again, I took more damage from that because I keep forgetting it's there, but that's good because then the more I forget that it's there and the more that I don't react to it, the better. So here we go. We have our moving platform here, and it looks like it's kind of bouncing off of it a little too much, and that might be the bounding box that we'd have to tweak, which we can mess around with. Or you can actually just change the collision to be on overlap, so it'll actually bounce off the solid object on overlap. And our spikes are actually destroying when they collide with our platform, which is good. We wanted that to happen. All of this is good. And let's go over here. We're not moving. This did not get copied over then. I probably copied the wrong thing or something happened there, so let's fix that. And then I need my power up to get up there, but that looks like it's working. So let me actually fix, why did that not go the way I intended it to? Let's see what happens if I move this over like this. Let's see what happens if I move this up like this and move this guy down. Just like that, and hit play. Messing around with this kind of stuff is fun, but it also can be overwhelming when you have a lot of things working for your game. So you kind of want to just pick the things that you think work for your level and hope that they work to your desired effect here. So like this should take me there, and then it should stop. And I can go on this guy. And there's other things that you can do to trigger this from this point on. Let's see if this is going vertical. Nope, now this is really breaking. Let's fix this guy. I don't know why he's going all over the place. But you can now start to, and you know what I could do? I could actually make its own tube. I could really just make this long platform here that he would bounce off of, but I could actually try to solidify this a little bit more and lock them in. But what I was going to say was you could actually trigger your platforms differently. You could actually start to expand from just having these guys move up and down, left and right with on all the time is what I meant to say. You can have it like if you get on it, maybe you have to press a button to start it, or maybe you get on it and it waits 5 seconds when it collides. So that's something you could add in very easily. I just told you how to do it. You can go right into the collision event, and when it collides with it, we can have it wait before it actually bounces off the platform or something like that. There's a bunch of other things that we can mess around with and do, but this should actually work pretty well. I'm not sure if that's going to work for the vertical platform that we are having difficulty with. Let's see what the result is, and let me get my power up too. The result is we have this kind of cool effect. There we go. Now I can actually jump and wall slide down here. Let's see what happens. It's kind of just bouncing over the place. It's getting a little stuck there. That's actually kind of working minus from up there. But we can always get off. We can always get back on. But I'll mess around with that and see why it's not actually bouncing back and forth here. It should bounce back and forth a little bit better, I would assume. So that is pretty much it for this lecture. This lecture's been a little bit longer, and it's been more about the designing than the programming, whereas the last lecture was just kind of me talking about how to program the player. But we're getting there. There was a whole lot to get set up before we can actually get into the crux of actually just programming in the fun gameplay. So we still have to do all the signs, and the signs will actually start to tell us what to do in the game. And then we still have to program the enemy AI, which is really going to be when the game starts to take shape, because now we have something for our player or our user to interact with and achieve. We have it has the ability to go and attack the player, and then we have the ability to kill it. So adding in the enemy AI is going to be a big boost for the game, because that's just going to give it more purpose. And then adding in a boss battle as well. We have to add in coins, which I was thinking about doing in this lecture here, but I think we'll save it for the next lecture or when I do the HUD, so that way we can have all of those go in at the same time, and coins are going to be something that's really important. I'm going to fix anything that went wrong with this lecture here, like this little vertical guy, and I'll come back and tell you what I did to fix it. But thank you so much for watching this long lecture. I hope you are enjoying this series. It may be going at a slower pace or a faster pace for you, but go through this video series, go through the assets folder, and make sure you look at how this project is done, because I've done this all with no plugins, and we're going to do the whole thing. And we're going to wrap it all up in a bow with a nice menu system with options and different controls for your player to do, so you can really start to make your own indie games on your own, whether you've never programmed a game before or you have, and just to make your Construct 2 games that much better. So thank you again for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.